This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. Today, we talk Newport politics and all things Newport with Christian Winthrop, founder of the Newport Buzz. So if you think back to last Tuesday's episode with Dr. Wendy Schiller, the chairwoman of the Brown University Political Science Department, our conversation focusing on, obviously, the presidential election for the most part, but in general, the election's already underway, right, folks? I mean, the mail ballots are out there. People are early voting. I mean, we're seeing significant numbers in Providence and around the state as far as in-person early voting. So our election coverage here on B-Town this year, hey, for some of you may have already voted and doing the best we can, though, but at least keep that conversation going, right? Because not everyone's voted, and there's going to be conversation, and there's definitely a value, I think, to keeping the Election Day conversation going through Election Day itself, even if many people have already cast their ballot. We'll do just that here on the Bartholomew Town Podcast over the next few weeks. I'm going to get into some really interesting nuances, plus kind of do some 36,000-foot view stuff with some commentary and some of the analysts that you've already come to know here in the Ocean State. Today, we kind of zoom in on Newport, Rhode Island, which is really a fascinating political culture and just an interesting place in general in the state. Some of you know I lived there for a few years, and I still am down there quite frequently. And the Newport Buzz is a blog that not only reaches locally, but it also has a strong reach on a national basis, particularly in Boston, in New York City, and in Florida. So in many ways, the Newport Buzz, it kind of serves as one of the measuring sticks for what's going on in Rhode Island as a whole for the rest of the country. So I wanted to have Christian on, have a conversation about a number of things. I mean, you'll hear it coming up in just a few moments, of course, but we talk about coronavirus's impact on the city, and we get into some of the nuances of Newport politics and fascinating stuff. We're going to have a little bit more on Newport. I'm putting together some episodes that'll really start to drop next week that you're going to hear from some different candidates, again, some different analysts, and we'll start to get a picture of around the state that we've already started to paint here on B-Town a bit. But today, zooming in on Newport and having a conversation with the one and only Christian Winthrop, and that's coming up in just a few moments. By the way, B-Town is a listener-supported program, and for as little as $3 per month, you can help to sustain the independent journalism, opinion, analysis, and entertainment that we've become known for. Simply head to patreon.com/BartholomewTown. You'll see some options there for how you may become a contributor, including an insider, a B-Town insider, that is. If you do so, you'll get exclusive monthly content. And I'd be remiss to not give a shout out to social media. Why not, right? We've got the Facebook group, the Bartholomew Town Podcast Facebook group. You can get there by going to btown.stream. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Bill Bartholomew. All right, let's get to it. Christian Winthrop of the Newport Buzz. All right, well, we're here with Christian Winthrop, the proprietor and character behind the Newport Buzz, which is one of the state's leading digital publications, and a friend to Bartholomew Town. You were actually the first person that offered distribution way back when I started this idea, and nobody was answering my calls, and you actually reached out and said, hey, let's get this thing out there. So I'm internally grateful.
I think I recognized the talent very early on.
Well, I appreciate it.
Well, you know, I was a fan from seeing you out playing in your band and all your music. And then when you started, I was like, all right, we've got to get this guy on the platform.
Well, definitely appreciate it. Lots going on in Newport right now. The city's shifting. We're seeing this influx of people from New York and Boston, kind of the decision to say, hey, you know what, if I'm going to be remote working, remote learning, whatever, I may as well be somewhere other than a major city. And Newport is really appealing because it's walkable. It's also got fairly quick access to both Boston and New York. And that's sort of changing the dynamics of the real estate market and in general, a little bit the dynamics of the city. But we're also seeing problems, of course, Griswold's Tavern, other businesses that are suffering through the pandemic, and in some cases, even not really fully recovered from the gas crisis a few years ago. So can you kind of paint a picture of what Newport looks like right now as a place to live, a place to work? What is the current state of the city?
So, I mean, first of all, you know, for a long while, there's been a natural symbiosis between Newport, New York, and Newport and Boston. So in the summertime, all the New Yorkers and all the Bostonians come flooding up here, and you know, we go from 27,000 year-round residents to probably close to 100. So that's a natural thing anyway. I think that with what's happening in the cities now, with everything shut down, there's no indoor dining in New York. People are moving out in droves. I think a lot of the New Yorkers are like, hell, why don't we go to Newport? Because Newport's still a bargain when you compare it to, say, the Hamptons. This is, a house in Newport that cost $1 million costs $7 million in the Hamptons. So people are coming up for a relative discount. I don't consider it a discount. I consider it pretty damn expensive.
Yeah.
But, so that's what's happening. And, with COVID in general, Newport's actually been really busy. All summer, it's been super difficult to get reservations anywhere, especially at the more popular places. The outdoor dining has certainly helped. But, we're still busy. I went and picked up breakfast yesterday at Crew Cafe, and there was a line out the door. That's on a Thursday in September. We're really busy still. Now, businesses are hurting, but I'm just glad for the influx of tourists and new residents that we have, or we'd be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, there's been some complaints this year from locals who are saying, hey, look, people are coming in and we're not necessarily able to get to certain beaches, rejects over off Bailey's East, as it's known. You felt the presence of people that are in spots that are typically local spots, but at the same time, that has helped to uplift and sustain the dynamics of the city through the crisis.
So at Rejects Beach, they put a limit of 200 people on the beach at any one time. So people were waiting for 2-3 hours. There were lines spilling out into Bellevue Avenue for people waiting to get onto Rejects Beach. What I've seen this year is because the beaches have been so locked down or tightened up, people are now, sunbathing and swimming off of the Cliff Walk, the entire Ocean Drive. Labor Day, Saturday, I had some friends in from out of town, and I decided to give them a tour. And we drove around the Ocean Drive, and it was literally bumper to bumper. It was like we were in a parade the entire time. It probably took me 45 minutes to get through it.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that ever. And I've lived in Newport for my entire life, except for, 10 years in New York City. I've never seen traffic like we've had this year.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. We actually found a couple of new spots ourselves. Some of us, we different parks and things like that, because just couldn't get onto the beach, couldn't get really downtown anywhere. And it was just like from a semi-local perspective, I suppose, which is what I consider myself at this point, living in Providence, but having lived in Newport and still having strong community ties there, I found it was time to experience new places. You spend a lot of time in Ballard's Park, you spend a lot of time in the other city parks. It was in some ways exciting to kind of reinvent how to spend summer in Newport for this year, because a lot of those traditionally local spots were filled with out of towners or whatever you want to call them, but at the end of the day, those are the people that were spending money, keeping the city moving.
Right. And they're also filled with locals.
Yeah.
And locals had a really difficult time getting on the beach this year. I would get pictures sent to me every weekend of what the traffic was like to get on Second Beach. And if you weren't in line by 7:30 a.m., you weren't getting on. Like, forget about it. And, and includes locals. I guess if you're a local, you can ride your bike down there, or you can walk down. But it's been, I don't know, we've had a really busy year. Newport seems a little different than the other places that I've been paying attention to around the country.
What's also been fascinating is from a COVID standpoint, trying to understand what the numbers look like in Newport has been. Look, there's a lot of people who come in, maybe they're sick and they go back to New York or any other state, so their numbers are reported in that state. So you don't necessarily have a complete count, but by and large,
there's no way we have.
Yeah, they've been low.
Yeah, there's no way you can have a complete count with it.
Yeah.
It's, someone comes down here and they get COVID and they go back to Boston. They test they're on their rolls. We don't even know about it really. And, with even early on in the pandemic, when, the governor basically said, if you're not from Rhode Island, do not come to Rhode Island. And there was a radio station in New Bedford that was encouraging people to come to Newport for a day tour and how great it was. So people have not been following the quarantine rules at all. Zero, none. Like the number of people that I meet out and that I talk to, or friends who are coming in from, COVID states, nobody is following the quarantine rule in Newport. Nobody.
We also have the opening of the Hammett's Wharf Hotel this year. Hotel development has been a key issue in Newport. It's sort of corresponded with an increase in Airbnbs and other short-term rentals. What has that experience been like as more and more places to stay in Newport emerge? Obviously hotels other than the Marriott were all closed at the beginning of the pandemic, but now, things are opening up a bit.
Well, so in this summer, Hammett's opened up, and so did the Brenton Hotel. And, I guess the studies that have been done show that Newport was like 1,500 hotel rooms short for just to absorb all the visitors that come in on a weekly basis. And, both of these hotels were very controversial. There was tons of pushback and a lot of NIMBYism going on. But if you look at Hammett's, it was formerly the Newport Yachting Center that had the tent and all the concerts, and the neighbors repeatedly complained about noise. It's one of the things that blows my mind about Newport. Somebody moves in next to an entertainment venue, and then lo and behold, they're pissed because it's loud.
Yeah,
and
right.
It just doesn't make any sense. So the Yachting Center said, okay, we're done. We're not doing the tent anymore. All the concerts and comedy festivals, all that, it's all going away. So we had an empty parcel there. What are we going to do with it? They built a hotel on it. I can't fault the developers for what they're doing, although there are a lot of locals that have really gone after it.
It's fascinating as well because when you consider the concerns with Airbnb in Newport, which are plenty, and that impacting the neighborhoods, particularly I look at Broadway where I lived. They've got the slogan where the locals go, this, that, and the other. But at the same time, it's now become mostly short-term rentals, it seems anyway, during the summer. You walk down the street at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you've got, what seems like a fraternity party up on some balcony. Somebody's throwing a beer can off the ledge. It's sort of shifted. So you would think, all right, well, the hotel industry can, again, absorb some of those people and help to allow for the neighborhoods to grow in a more community and local oriented manner. Not to say that someone who has a house and rents out a room or one apartment for Airbnb should be shut down, but some of those Airbnbs that are literally somebody got a building and turned it into a hotel of their own, the hotel development takes that clientele and puts them in the right zone, so to speak.
Yeah, I think what we saw with the increased popularity of Airbnb, there were, a few very enterprising developers that came in, bought buildings that, locals were living in and paying, say, $1,000 a month. They kicked everyone out, redid the building, and now they're getting $350 to $500 a night renting on Airbnb, which then escalates all the the year-round rental prices because we're decreasing the housing stock. Now, the city's been trying to work on that and crack down on it. People who are in business zones, they can pretty much do what they do, but I've seen a lot of places in like full-on residential neighborhoods where people have just come in, bought a 4-family house and turned it into Airbnb. Now, the city's really working to crack down on that because there was actually one case. There was a woman on Houston Avenue that, I think she got fined like $25,000 from the city because she just constantly ignored any of the city's warnings about having, and she just turned it into party houses all weekend long.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears to, it's an election year. We've already had the primary, which Newport is a situation where, first of all, it's nonpartisan elections, although you can basically read where someone lands by reading their platforms, but lands in terms of ideologically. But the mayor is selected by the city council, so you basically vote for. There are 3 wards, and then there are at-large councilors. The current mayor, Jamie Bova, an at-large councilor, came in first amongst all candidates in the primary as far as the at-large. So that gives a little bit of pushback, I suppose, to the notion that there's largely, I guess you would say, folks who are completely dissatisfied with the current council. But what's your assessment? We saw Paul Marshall overtake Kate Leonard in Ward 3, which is a significant win for, or a significant shift of power, I suppose,
right,
down there.
But they're facing off in the general. So it was a three-way primary in Ward 3, and Marshall came in first, Leonard came in second, so those two move on to the general election to face off. I know that Kate's working really hard to try to reclaim that throne. She's been there for 20 years, and she's actually a really, really responsive member of the city council. She often seems to be the voice of reason and the voice of, hey, let's think this through, guys. Like, let's not get emotional over an issue and let's be analytical. But so that's going to be a really interesting race. There's a lot of energy behind Marshall. There's a lot.
He of the planning board, which really has a lot to do with that zoning conversations. Paul Marshall, someone who I guess trying to spin his campaign and his candidacy as representing local interests, But again, as you say, Kate Leonard responsive to locals, whether you agree or disagree with her specific positions. Overall, do you get the sense that there is going to be upheaval broadly when it comes to the city council? Do you think Mayor Bova is in a position where, if reelected to the council, she will be retained as mayor by her fellow councilors?
I don't see any chance that she retains the mayor's seat. I don't see. Wow. There's none. She's, from talking to other city councilors, she's been the least responsive mayor in recent history. She doesn't work with her councilors. So I believe she'll be reelected to the council, but I don't see any circumstance that she becomes mayor again.
Who's your favorite in terms of a pick to become mayor if Bova is not selected?
Well, I think, my prediction right now would be the people that get in for the at-large seats will be Bova, Jean Marie Napolitano, who is a former mayor, Lynn Segley, who is a former second ward councilor who's now moving up, wants to run at large. And, Lynn is actually a really good candidate to be mayor. She's a very, very diligent council person. She works hard and she knows the issues. And then, the two others that I keep going back and forth on who's going to get elected. There's Susan Taylor, who's currently Bova's vice mayor, and a newcomer, Kevin Michaud, who is, had a really strong showing in the primary, comes from a longtime local family. He seems to have a pretty good grasp of the issues. So the fourth slot I see going between Taylor and Michaud.
Fascinating stuff, and we're going to have to wait until November to get that answered. But it's a unique element of Rhode Island politics. The Newport Council and the person who is chosen as mayor, and that's a role that is sometimes really a statewide name recognition type of role, and other times sort of just fades into the background where it's like saying who's the city manager of South Kingstown or something.
Correct. Well, I think the mayor of Newport can make their job what they want to make it. When my father was mayor of Newport for the last however many years, he retired 2 years ago, he made it was his full-time job. He was retired. He's lived in Newport for 70 years, and he really made it, a very, very popular post. Everyone knows him. People still think that he's the mayor, actually, when he goes around town.
Right.
So there isn't that much engagement with the locals. People don't really pay attention to local government, right? Like, ask anyone who their congressman is, and they probably don't know it's Cicilline. But by and large, you can make whatever you want out of that office. And throughout the years, some have faded into the woodwork and just kind of went around, and they were the council chair. And then you've had, others like Richard Stardella was a very popular mayor, very much out front, and led the city. I think, as my father, Harry Winthrop, did. We see a different style of leadership with Bova. which is not to criticize. It's just a different style. She's more, she's kind of laid back and not as involved with the bigger stuff that happens in the city.
Discover over 200 episodes of Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast, on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your pods. Or head over to our website, ripodcast.com. One of the biggest fallouts from COVID this year on a statewide basis, really on a global basis, depending on who you ask, and certainly for Newport, was the cancellation of the folk and jazz festivals. What was that like for you? Because I know you're someone who's there and covers it. And, you bring a crew every year, you've got the hat on, you're a fixture of that festival. So what was it like on an emotional level, and then also just on a citywide, I guess, content basis? Yeah,
I mean, losing folk and jazz were daggers through the heart this year, right?
Yeah.
I was hoping that they could make it happen. I've been going to it my entire life. I've been covering it for the last 9 years since I started Newport Buzz, and it literally, Folk Fest is literally my favorite weekend of the year. It's the most magical, beautiful weekend in Newport, and it was a blow. People were really sad. The folk community, I know as a whole, was really bummed out. I'm hoping that we can get it back in 2021, but who knows what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball there, but it was a big, big loss to the city and a big economic loss. We didn't have the, 20,000 people a day pouring into the city, spending money, staying in our hotels, going to our bars and our restaurants, and shopping in our stores. So it was a big economic loss for the city of Newport. The boat show is supposed to happen. The boat show is a huge economic engine for the city. We lost a lot of big stuff in Newport this year. And the bars and restaurants, as crowded as they are, they're only at a certain capacity, so they're all hurting as well.
Tough times, to say the least, and obviously, hopefully 2021 brings not only the folk festival and the jazz festival back, but in general, things start to settle in. We have exactly who it's like the silliest possible conversation to have right now. Is there going to be a vaccine? Is there not going to be a vaccine? Is this going to happen? We'll find out in due time.
No, Trump said it was coming before Election Day. Don't worry.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'll be in line for that. Not. All right. Last moments here. Let's talk about Newport Buzz. It's a platform that has statewide name recognition and it has regional name recognition. I just happen to know because I hear from people that have said, hey, I heard your podcast via the Buzz and I live in New York. It's cool you used to live there. So I know for a fact you've got an audience that looks to Newport for entertainment and information, and you provide that. Talk about being an independent content producer here in Rhode Island, because you were, we've got obviously B-Town, but we've got the Go Locals and, then of course Hummel's out there. He's been doing it for a decade, but you were one of the first people to really double down on independent news and information here in Rhode Island. So what's that been like?
Yeah, the way it happened. So I was living in New York City and I was working as a producer, an entertainment producer for the Hearst Corporation. And I'd come home for a weekend. They kind of laid off our entire division. And I was in Newport for a weekend in like February of 2011. And I went to go on my phone to find out what was happening in town. And there was nothing. And when I was in New York, we lived on our phones and was online media. And there literally was nothing in Newport. And it kind of a light bulb went off in my head. I went home. I was staying with my parents that weekend and I stared at my ceiling all night. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm moving back to Newport and I'm starting an online news business. And it's been great. It's been rewarding. I have a pretty big audience. We reach over 1 million people a month through social media. I have about 200,000 uniques on the website every month. My number one traffic city is Newport. Number 2 is New York City, and number 3 is Boston. And I think, that also speaks to the fact that they're all pouring into the city. But, I have readers from all over the world because people care about Newport. Newport's an international city. So I got lucky. I got in super early and was able to grow my social medias my social media number is really big. Someone starting today is going to have a difficult time, but I welcome them all to the game. I think more voices are better than less, but it's been great, and I've really made some incredible friends through it as well. I think, people have seen me doing Instagram live videos and whatever, and I get stopped every day wherever I go, and they're like, "Hey, Newport Buzz," and I've made really, really great friends through it. I met you through it. If I didn't have Buzz, we wouldn't have really had any reason to interact, I think.
Right.
But so it's been great. I love what I do. I work on my couch all day. It's
can't go wrong with that.
Yeah. I mean, how can you beat that? I don't have to go into an office. I don't have to listen to a boss. I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely, and you mentioned being in New York, because I was in Brooklyn for a decade. You go on Brooklyn Vegan, you've got the Deli magazine, you've got the Elle magazine, you've got whatever, Unlimited, Free Williamsburg. I mean, there were just a zillion places. Plus, of course, the Village Voice. Everything, there was plenty of places to get that sort of content.
Time Out was super
Time
popular,
Out. Right?
It was a bit of a culture shock where I was like, wait, this doesn't exist in Newport yet, and it was a struggle at first to try to get advertisers on board, because people would be like, well, I'm in the newspaper. I advertise in a newspaper. And I'm like, well, we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
And not to slam the newspapers, because we have two great papers here. We have Newport This Week and the Daily News that both do a great job. But I just knew that the audience was becoming fragmented. And, I used to say people live on their phones. If you go out to dinner, you'll see a husband and wife, and they're just playing on Instagram the whole time. Yeah. Nobody talks. No one does anything. They just stare at their phones. So that's where my audience lives, and that's where I serve my content. I think I'm like 80% mobile now for traffic.
Fascinating. That's incredible. Yeah, because especially that's a major shift, obviously, because it used to be, hey, I'm at work, I'm bored, so let me check out what's going on. Now it's more integrated into free time in a way where people are really making that active choice to get hyper-local content. Yeah,
well, I think people are addicted to the social media. And, just as long as you feed them a little bit of crack here and there, that they just keep coming back for.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
All right, stay tuned for B-Town's continuing coverage of election 2020. You know where to go, wherever you're listening right now, or ripodcast.com.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.